You wake up on August 15th and something feels different. The air carries a weight, not of burden, but of expectation. It's the feast of the Assumption of Mary, when the Mother of God was taken up body and soul into heaven. But here you are, in your ordinary home, with ordinary concerns, wondering how this celestial celebration could possibly touch your daily reality. Saint Teresa of Ávila knew this feeling intimately, the yearning to bridge the gap between heaven and earth, between the sacred and the mundane. She understood that your home isn't just where you live, it's where your soul either flourishes or withers. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more teachings and counsel from Saint Teresa. Perhaps you've felt it before, that deep longing for the sacred to penetrate your everyday life, for your home to become more than just four walls and a roof. Saint Teresa experienced this same hunger in her convent cells, in the simple corridors of Ávila, in the quiet corners where she met God. She discovered that the divine doesn't need grand cathedrals to manifest. It needs willing hearts and consecrated spaces, no matter how humble. Today, she wants to teach you something profound. Your home can become a sanctuary, a place where Mary's Assumption isn't just remembered but lived, where heaven touches earth through the simplest gestures. The beauty of what Teresa discovered is that transformation doesn't require perfection. It requires intention. She learned this through years of struggle, through moments when prayer felt dry and God seemed distant. In those very moments, she found that small, faithful acts of devotion created invisible bridges between her heart and heaven. When you understand what she's about to teach you, your morning routine will never be the same. Your meals will carry new meaning, and your very walls will seem to breathe with sacred purpose. Are you ready to let Saint Teresa guide you into a mystery that has been hidden in plain sight? The Assumption of Mary isn't just a theological doctrine. It's a living invitation for your soul to rise, even while your feet remain planted on earth. What you're about to discover will change not just how you celebrate this feast, but how you live every single day in the presence of the divine. The first light of dawn breaks through your window, and already the world is pulling at you. Obligations, worries, the endless list of things to do. But Saint Teresa learned something revolutionary in her morning hours. The first moments of consciousness are sacred territory, battleground for your soul's direction for the entire day. She discovered that how you begin determines how you continue, and that Mary, in her Assumption, offers you a pattern of rising that goes beyond merely getting out of bed. This isn't about adding more tasks to your morning. It's about transforming the very act of awakening into prayer. Teresa's first practice was revolutionary in its simplicity, the sign of the cross with holy water upon waking. But this wasn't mere ritual. It was a declaration of war against the chaos that seeks to claim your soul before you've even fully opened your eyes. Through the intercession of Mary assumed into heaven, sanctify this day, she would whisper, letting the blessed water touch her forehead, her heart. She understood that holy water isn't magic. It's memory made tangible, reminding your soul of its baptismal dignity, of your call to rise above the merely human. Have you ever noticed how your first thoughts shape your entire day? Teresa observed this with the precision of a scientist and the wisdom of a mystic. She saw that the soul awakened in God's presence carries a different energy, a different clarity, a different peace throughout all the hours that follow. The demons that whisper despair and anxiety lose their power when the soul has already been claimed by heaven before the day begins. This practice creates what she called determined determination, a settled resolve that remains steady regardless of what the day might bring. What if your bedroom could become a chapel, your awakening a resurrection? Teresa believed that every morning offers you a chance to practice Mary's Assumption, to let your soul rise above earthly concerns into divine perspective. When you mark yourself with holy water and place your day under Mary's intercession, you're not performing empty gestures. You're training your soul to remember its true home, its ultimate destination, even while navigating the beautiful challenges of human life. Your home has thresholds, doorways that mark the boundary between your private sanctuary and the chaotic world beyond. But Saint Teresa saw something most people miss. These thresholds are spiritual battlegrounds, places where your soul either carries heaven's peace into the world or allows the world's turmoil to invade your sanctuary. She developed a practice so powerful, yet so simple, that it transformed not just her convents, but the very atmosphere of every space she touched. The second practice involves the Magnificat, Mary's Song of Triumph, proclaimed at your doors while sprinkling holy water. Picture Teresa herself standing at the entrance of the convent of St. Joseph, her voice clear and strong as she proclaimed Mary's words. "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior." But she wasn't just reciting. She was establishing territorial claims in the spiritual realm. Each doorway sprinkled with holy water while proclaiming the Magnificat becomes a portal where heaven meets earth, where Mary's Assumption echoes through your daily comings and goings. This isn't superstition, it's spiritual architecture, building invisible walls of protection and blessing around your family's life. The Magnificat isn't just Mary's personal prayer. It's the soundtrack of Assumption, the melody that carried her body and soul into heaven. When you speak these words at your thresholds, you're aligning your home with the same divine current that lifted the Mother of God beyond earthly limitations. Teresa understood that words have power, especially words spoken by Mary and repeated by faithful souls. Your voice becomes an instrument of heaven, your doorways become altars, your comings and goings become processionals of faith. What transformation might you witness if your family began each day knowing that your home has been blessed, that your comings and goings are covered by Mary's mantle? Teresa promised that homes where the Magnificat echoes daily become different, more peaceful, more protected, more aligned with God's will. The world may rage beyond your doors, but within these consecrated thresholds, you carry the atmosphere of Assumption, the peace that Mary knew as she was lifted into eternal glory. Write in the comments, "Saint Teresa, teach me to make my home a sanctuary." Subscribe to our channel to continue receiving these transformative teachings that can change your spiritual life forever. Evening settles over your home, and the family gathers, perhaps tired, perhaps scattered in spirit from the day's demands. This is when St. Teresa would implement her third practice, one that she considered essential for any household seeking to live the mystery of Mary's Assumption. The Rosary, specifically the glorious mysteries with particular attention to the fourth mystery, the Assumption, and the fifth, the Coronation of Mary. But Teresa's approach to the Rosary wasn't mechanical. It was intensely personal, a family conversation with heaven that transformed the very atmosphere of domestic life. Teresa discovered that the Rosary prayed as a family creates what she called a circle of fire, an invisible protection that surrounds not just the individuals, but the relationships between them. When you meditate on Mary's Assumption while your fingers move across the beads, you're not just remembering a historical event, you're participating in an ongoing reality. Mary's body and soul, assumed into heaven, continues to intercede for your family's struggles, your children's futures, your deepest concerns. Each Hail Mary becomes a call for that same assumptive power to lift your family above earthly divisions and into divine unity. The beauty of this practice lies in its accessibility. You don't need everyone to be a mystic, just willing to sit together and let their voices join in ancient prayer. Teresa observed that families who prayed the Rosary together developed an almost supernatural ability to weather storms, to forgive quickly, to find peace in the midst of conflict. She wrote to her spiritual daughters, "The Rosary is Mary's chain that binds families to heaven and to each other. When earthly ties grow weak, these celestial bonds grow stronger." Have you ever noticed how the simple act of praying together changes the energy in a room? Teresa was fascinated by this phenomenon long before modern psychology understood the power of shared ritual and synchronized activity. When your family gathers around the Rosary, focusing on Mary's glorious Assumption, you're creating what Teresa called a foretaste of heaven, a preview of the eternal unity that awaits all faithful souls. Each evening spent in this practice builds what Teresa termed supernatural habits, patterns of grace that become stronger than patterns of conflict or division. Lunch is finished, or perhaps dinner, and the family lingers at the table. This is the moment when St. Teresa would introduce her fourth practice, what she called the Minute of Mercy, a brief but powerful ritual that could heal wounds before they festered and prevent the small resentments that destroy family peace. Teresa understood that the Assumption of Mary wasn't just about Mary's physical elevation. It was about the triumph of mercy over judgment, grace over grudge, forgiveness over fault-finding. The practice is deceptively simple. Each family member shares one thing they're grateful for from the day and asks forgiveness for one thing, however small. Forgive me for, and thank you for, become the twin engines that drive your family's spiritual life toward the heights of Assumption. Teresa discovered that this practice prevents what she called the accumulation of shadows, those small hurts and unspoken irritations that, left unaddressed, can turn a home into a battlefield rather than a sanctuary. Teresa wrote extensively about how unforgiveness weighs down the soul, making spiritual elevation impossible. She observed that families practicing regular, gentle reconciliation developed what she termed assumptive lightness, a freedom from the heavy burdens of accumulated resentment that allowed their love to rise above human limitations. When you practice the Mercy Minute, you're training your family in the art of letting go, of rising above offense, of choosing peace over being right. What might change in your home if every day ended with gratitude expressed and forgiveness sought? Teresa promised that this simple practice would create families of Assumption, households where mercy flows so freely that they become previews of heaven itself. The power isn't in the perfection of the practice, but in the consistency, the daily choice to clear the spiritual atmosphere of your home so that divine grace can move unhindered through your relationships. As night approaches and your family prepares for rest, Saint Teresa's fifth practice invites you into one of the most tender expressions of domestic spirituality, the blessing of bedrooms, especially those of children and anyone who might be ill or struggling. Teresa understood that sleep is a form of daily death and awakening a daily resurrection, making the bedroom a particularly sacred space where souls are vulnerable and in need of protection. This isn't about fear, it's about love expressed through spiritual vigilance. With holy water, you trace a small cross on the wall or headboard of each bedroom, saying simply, "Guardian angel, watch over us. Mary, lead us to Jesus." Teresa discovered that this simple gesture created what she called sanctuaries of rest, spaces where nightmares had less power, where peace descended more easily, where the soul could truly rest in God's care. She wrote that the bedroom blessed in Mary's name becomes a rehearsal for heaven, where souls practice the trust they will need for their final sleep. Teresa was particularly devoted to the protection of children and the sick, understanding that these souls are often more sensitive to spiritual influences, both good and ill. She taught that the cross traced in holy water doesn't just bless the room, it claims the space for heaven, declaring that this place belongs to God and is under Mary's maternal protection. The blessing isn't magical thinking, it's sacramental living, using visible signs to invoke invisible realities. Have you ever entered a room and immediately felt peace, as if something holy lingered in the air? Teresa believed that rooms regularly blessed in this way develop what she called accumulated sanctity, a spiritual atmosphere that grows stronger with each blessing, each prayer, each act of faith performed within their walls. Your bedroom isn't just where you sleep. It becomes a place where your soul learns to rest in divine protection, where Mary's assumed presence watches over your most vulnerable hours. The house is quiet now, the day's tasks completed, but Saint Teresa's sixth and most powerful practice awaits. Before an image of Our Lady, perhaps a simple statue, a holy card, or even just a printed picture, you and your family gather for what Teresa considered the crown of domestic spirituality. The daily act of consecration to Mary coupled with a concrete gesture of charity. This practice synthesizes everything Teresa learned about the spiritual life, that true devotion must be both interior and active, both mystical and practical. The consecration itself is beautifully simple. Mary, I entrust myself to you. Lead me to Jesus and to your will today. But Teresa's genius lay in connecting this spiritual surrender to immediate action. Each family member chooses one concrete act of charity to perform before the day ends. A phone call to reconcile with someone, help for a neighbor, a kind gesture for someone in the household. Teresa understood that Mary's Assumption wasn't just a privilege to admire, but a pattern to follow, and that following Mary always leads to serving others. Teresa wrote to her spiritual daughters, "Beware of a devotion to Mary that makes you feel holy but doesn't make you loving. True devotion to Our Lady always bears fruit in charity because Mary's whole life was ordered toward bringing Christ to others. When you consecrate yourself to Mary and then immediately choose a specific act of love, you're practicing what Teresa called Assumption spirituality, letting your soul rise above selfishness into the heights of practical charity. This combination of consecration and action creates what Teresa observed to be a powerful spiritual dynamic, The consecration opens your heart to Mary's intercession, while the charitable act proves the sincerity of your surrender. Together, they form what she called the perfect prayer, one that unites words with deeds, intention with action, heaven with earth. Your living room becomes a chapel, your family becomes a missionary community, your ordinary evening becomes a foretaste of the eternal communion where Mary reigns as Queen. After weeks of practicing these 6 devotions, something begins to shift in your home, something subtle but unmistakable. Saint Teresa anticipated this transformation and wrote extensively about what she called the fruits of assumptive living. She understood that when a family consistently practices these devotions with faith and love, the very atmosphere of the home begins to change. It's not magic, it's the natural result of aligning your domestic life with heavenly realities, of letting Mary's Assumption become the organizing principle of your daily routine. Teresa observed that families practicing these devotions developed what she termed supernatural resilience, an ability to weather storms with unusual peace, to forgive quickly and completely, to find joy even in difficult circumstances. The holy water becomes more than blessed liquid. It becomes a reminder of your baptismal dignity. The Magnificat becomes more than ancient words. It becomes your family's anthem of trust. The rosary becomes more than repetitive prayer. It becomes your lifeline to heaven. But perhaps the most remarkable change Teresa documented was in the relationships themselves. She wrote, "Where Mary truly reigns in a home, hearts soften toward one another. Old wounds heal more quickly, new hurts are forgiven before they can take root, and love grows stronger even through trials." This isn't sentimentality. It's the practical fruit of living under Mary's mantle, of organizing family life around the mystery of Assumption, the triumph of grace over nature, heaven over earth, love over selfishness. What you discover, as weeks turn to months of faithful practice, is that these 6 devotions don't just change your feast day celebration. They transform your understanding of what home can be. Your house becomes what Teresa called a domestic heaven, not perfect, but peaceful, not without conflict, but with supernatural resources for resolution, not immune to suffering, but equipped with divine comfort. You begin to live the Assumption not just on August 15th, but every day, as your family learns to rise above the merely human into the realm of grace. But Teresa, ever the realist, knew that this path wouldn't be without challenges. She warned her spiritual children about what she called the resistance of the ordinary, the way routine can become mechanical, the way the enemy of souls attacks precisely those practices that bear the most fruit. You might find yourself forgetting the morning blessing, rushing through the Magnificat, letting the rosary become background noise rather than heart prayer. Teresa understood this struggle intimately and offered profound wisdom for persevering when devotion feels dry or difficult. The value of these practices, Teresa wrote, lies not in the consolation they bring, but in the fidelity they require. When you continue blessing your home even when you feel nothing, when you pray the rosary even when it seems empty, when you speak the Magnificat even when your heart is heavy, this is when you most perfectly imitate Mary's Assumption. She was lifted to heaven not because she felt perfect, but because she remained faithful. Teresa's insight penetrates to the heart of spiritual maturity. Constancy in small things prepares the soul for great things. There will be days when your family resists gathering for prayer, when the children complain, when you yourself question whether these simple practices really matter. Teresa anticipated these moments and counseled, "Do not measure the value of these devotions by immediate feelings or visible results. Measure them by the peace that slowly grows in your home, by the love that gradually deepens between family members, by the strength you discover in times of trial." She understood that spiritual fruit often grows slowly and is recognized only in retrospect. The enemy of souls particularly attacks family prayer because he understands its power to transform not just individuals but entire lineages. When your family perseveres in these devotions despite resistance, despite dryness, despite apparent insignificance, you join the ranks of what Teresa called hidden saints, ordinary families living extraordinary faithfulness, preparing for the Assumption that awaits all those who persevere in love. Your fidelity in small things echoes Mary's fidelity in great things, and heaven takes note of every faithful gesture, every persistent prayer, every act of domestic love. Now you understand what Saint Teresa discovered in the quiet corridors of her Reformed convents. The Assumption of Mary isn't just a doctrine to believe, but a way to live. These 6 practices, the morning blessing, the threshold magnificat, the evening rosary, the mercy minute, the bedroom blessings, and the daily consecration with charity, aren't merely devotions to perform, but pathways to transformation. When practiced with Teresa's determined determination, they create what she called families of assumption, households where heaven touches earth through the simplest, most ordinary gestures of love. Teresa's final insight about these practices was perhaps her most profound. They prepare your soul and your family for the ultimate assumption that awaits every faithful Christian. Death, for those who have practiced rising daily above selfishness into love, becomes not a fearful ending but a familiar motion, one more assumption into the arms of the God who has been present in every blessed threshold, every evening prayer, every act of forgiveness, every gesture of charity. Your ordinary home becomes a training ground for heaven. Your daily routines become rehearsals for eternity. The beauty of Teresa's vision is that it requires no special gifts, no mystical experiences, no dramatic conversions, only the willingness to let Mary's Assumption become the organizing principle of your domestic life. When you wake tomorrow morning, you have a choice. You can begin another ordinary day, or you can begin another day of Assumption, another day of letting your soul rise above the merely human into the realm of grace. The blessed water waiting by your bedside isn't just liquid, it's an invitation. The Magnificat on your lips isn't just words, it's a declaration. The rosary in your hands isn't just beads, it's a ladder to heaven. Saint Teresa's promise to you is simple but profound. A family that lives these practices faithfully will discover that they are already living a foretaste of the Assumption that awaits them. Heaven begins not after death, but in the blessed routines of faithful love, in the sacred ordinariness of a home where Mary reigns and Jesus is welcomed daily. Your house becomes what Teresa always dreamed of, a place where the eternal breaks through the temporal, where the assumed presence of Mary transforms the beautiful simplicity of family life into a preview of the eternal communion